All right, we live? I think we are going live. Sweet, let's do it. Okay. All right, so this is my first stream, doing it just for the PlebDevs community here on Twitch. I'm gonna start kind of having a Twitch presence, gonna start having a YouTube presence, just posting this content, mostly live coding, some workshops. And this is kind of an interesting one today. Like, I'm already doing this work on Stacker News, and I figured let's do an overview of the project a little bit and talk about how to run it locally, some of the hurdles you might need to get around, and then just do a code review and see if I can submit a PR right now for bounties on Stacker News. So the latter half is going to be more code review, maybe PR stuff, and the first half here, I'm just going to go over the project, how to run it locally, if maybe you're interested in contributing. So, cool. Yes. Stacker News overview of the project, how to run it locally. Let's get into it. I'm here on Stacker News, GitHub, stacker.news repo. And yeah, how I got started is how you get started with any open source project. I forked it over, I pulled it down locally, but it was kind of another story getting it running fully. Like, I had trouble at first. So I guess we can get it running first and foremost, and then we can kind of look into the code. So let's do that. So I have it here locally, and this is my version, but as far as running it, it will be the same process for you. So we can go ahead and open the terminal here. And, I guess first of all, a prerequisite and actually a benefit is that Stacker News is put into a Docker container. So if you don't know about Docker containers, it's just this containerization process that allows you to have a project with a lot of packages in it, a lot of dependencies. So like if we look at package.json, we look at all these different dependencies with all their different versions. It can be hard to replicate the person who's making Stacker News, like their environment versus your local environment. It can be hard to replicate that. So you bundle it into this container, in this Docker container, and it standardizes all these packages and just kind of locks them in. And then you can run the app easier. But, for a lot of, like for me as a pleb dev, like it was intimidating to learn at first, but really it's worth taking a tutorial at some point, and especially just trying to run your favorite local your favorite open source project locally or something like that. So so I'm opening up the Docker desktop app here. Docker, you can install Docker like on your command line, stuff like that, but I like to use a UI if it's there. It's easier to learn that way, I think. But there's sometimes it's good to have access to the command line tool. But you can just go to the Docker website and find how to install it. It will work on Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever. So you'll install the app, and you need to have it up. You need to have it running before this works. And yours actually won't look like this at first. This will be after running it the first time. It will generate locally this new container for you. And this is the Stacker News container. And it has kind of like, really it's a Stacker News image, and it's got 3 containers inside of it. That's just the lingo of how Docker works. But so you'll generate this locally after you run one easy command. And so you can just open up Stacker News locally, and you can run docker compose up -- build right here. And the first time you run this command, it'll take a long time, like a really long time, probably like 10 minutes or so. That's how it was for me, maybe like 5 minutes, depending on your machine. But afterwards, after that, like when you initially get the container set up, it will be pretty quick, probably a minute, 30 seconds, something like that. So I'll go ahead and run this, and it will basically spawn up this whole local environment inside of this container. You'll see a lot of commands fly by as these npm packages are being installed, and there might be a few errors thrown in here, but none of them are critical. We've been having this working for a while. And something I actually did a little while back for Stacker.news was add a Docker container onto their image here. So I added the worker container here, and it makes it a little bit easier to run locally, because before there used to be this worker script that you would have to run in order to have some of the, I think the search functions and API calls to work. So now this should all spawn up, and as soon as your Docker Compose finishes running and setting up, then you should be good. It should be just like any local web project that you run. And so here you can see it's going through the migrations. There's some errors in here. So the database is also hosted locally. We had the DB container here, along with the app just being the front end, or really the Next.js app, which is kind of a serverless app. And we got down to this point where we see it's ready, and it's telling us to check it out at localhost 3000. So I've already got that up here, so I can refresh, and it'll take a minute to start up. But this should run. At least you should be able to get to the home page pretty easily doing this. I guess one thing to mention, I was talking about installing Docker. You do need to have Docker Compose as well, which is technically a second package that works along with Docker. But that's a good thing to know. If it's not working with just Docker, you need to go look up how to install Docker Compose as well. But it's a huge package, so they have good documentation. It's very well documented, easy to set up. So here we are. So we are on the Stacker News homepage, and this is actually my local version, my updated version right now. So we have the bounties in here showing. So that's kind of the new piece of UI you're seeing. But since I've used this local database before, so there's these items, these posts, they already exist for me locally, but at first it'll be completely empty. So we've got it running now. Let's check out the actual code base and talk about the structure of it a little bit here. Because if you're interested in contributing, it's good to know the general, at least the framework, or be familiar with the framework for the project you might be contributing to. And Stacker News uses Next.js. I think a lot of the syntax in here, a lot of the packages that are used are pretty standard, but it was new for me when I was going in. And mainly the backend and the database, which we can go in here right now and look at what's here. It's Stacker News is using Prisma, and it's using GraphQL, which were two technologies I wasn't as familiar with when I was starting. But really, it's a Postgres database at its core. So if you have any familiarity with SQL or relational databases at all, it's not going to be too foreign. And the documentation for Prisma, the documentation for GraphQL, it's all really great. So you can figure out what you need to do pretty quickly. And I didn't have to change much of the database stuff, even doing a large feature like bounties. So, basically the app is from the database up. We've got Prisma and all of our migrations here, which if you did make a change to a table or a row in a database, you would have to run a new migration. That's all in here in Prisma. It's pretty straightforward. The schema is defining, the types, the structure of all of the data. So I, probably went here and so I updated the item table and I added bounty to it. And really everything here, the code base is built in such a way to where everything is abstracted. Not everything, but a lot of stuff is abstracted. So every post, every kind of post or comment or anything on Stacker News is really just an item. And so, this item model has a lot of properties, it has a lot of fields, and a lot of them are conditional, like the app will render in different ways depending on what data is populated from when Stacker News is querying its database and saying, okay, what's at this item ID, what's on this user. So different data will appear, and you'll kind of see that all throughout the front end, that lots of stuff that gets rendered, it's very conditional, lots of arguments that get passed in, they're conditional, they're contextual, which can make it a little bit difficult to start working in, but it is good code to do that versus having 1,000 different components, which is how a lot of my projects end up. But yeah, so since it's a Next.js app, we're gonna have pages here, and pages is gonna be separate from components. So yeah, we've got a components folder up here, which are all of the UI components, which are gonna be populated inside of the pages here. So if you understand how Next.js works, basically the pathing of for pages and for API, the pathing of these folders, the pathing of the directories determines what the URL is. It determines what the endpoints are. So, here at this point inside of pages, we're at localhost 3000. So if you're at index.js, you're going to be at the root. So this is like the root, app, or really layout that's dropped into here. And so, this is actually the root. This is the home page. This is what it is at the highest, most abstracted level, which it's cool how that works. But so yeah, into the pages here, and like the API, there's a lot of stuff in here. The LN auth, just the regular auth through GitHub, stuff like that. So hopefully you don't have to dig into there too much. And I actually haven't done too much inside of the API folder here. Yeah, I was mainly just touching the queries and the database models and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of the work I was doing was in the components here. And so, there's a solid list of components here, but everything is pretty well named. It's pretty well delineated. And item.js is probably one of the biggest ones. It's one of the most core ones because it's taking the generalized item that is any kind of post on Stacker News, and it's just dropping data, contextual data, conditional data into this component. And, it's probably one of the most complicated, but you can parse it out by just going back to the app here and seeing what things are called and searching inside of the code base. That's a lot of what I did, and just copying the syntax of what was there. That's a lot of what I did. So yes, and I guess from that point, what else do we want to talk about in here? I mean, we've got the fragments here, and the fragments are worth talking about. These are like queries that are done using Apollo through GraphQL. So Apollo is just an abstracted library for GraphQL, kind of like Mongoose for Mongo, if you're familiar with that. So I spent a lot of time in here. And so like anytime you want to update what's coming into one of the components, what kind of data is being queried, like a lot of times you'll be working inside of the fragments here. And this was all new syntax for me when I was starting out, but it's definitely something you can learn looking at the Apollo docs and stuff like that. So yeah, let's talk about like logging in locally, because this was one of the most difficult aspects for me when I was starting to work with Stacker News. I actually, before I even started working on it recently, or started working on this bounties feature, I tried to contribute to Stacker News about a year ago, and I could never, like, I could get it running locally, like I could get to this point right here. Of course, there was no posts, but I couldn't log in. And this was like holding me back from working on any of the features that I wanted to work on. So it was a huge blocker for me, and I opened issues and tried to ask about it, and had a back and forth with Keon, the founder, and I just couldn't figure it out, and I gave up. But coming back around, gotten some more direction, and I think the easiest way to do this is through GitHub, and that's kind of the method I've used. And once you set up a connection you can kind of make a bunch of clone GitHub accounts and bring them in as separate users. Like I have 2 different users here that I would bring in that would make items, so I could have different interactions and just test absolutely everything that might go on in the app. And so I can show you how to do that. So let's go over here. And so when you pull down the app, you will have this .env.sample. And I think, do you need to rename this? No, you don't. You'll just keep it the same name. And this is going to be all the environment variables that you're going to need to populate for some of the features. So a lot of them are static, like these ones at the bottom are static, and they will work for just like spawning your whole local environment and the database and all of that. But the authentication, you're going to have to fill this out. And so we would want to look at the GitHub here, where we have GitHub ID and GitHub secret. And so originally, like I just looked at these variables and I thought like, oh, okay, I'll find my GitHub ID, like my personal ID in the GitHub database, and I'll put in my password. But it's not quite like that. So you need to make a OAuth app just for your local environment, just for Stacker News here. So if I go to my settings on GitHub, just my profile and settings, I can go down to the very bottom of this sidebar here and go to developer settings, and you'll see OAuth apps here. And I already have, 2 different ones for Stacker News here, but you'll want to make a new OAuth app. And you'll need a callback URL. Let me click on one I already have here. It'll be easier to show. Yes, so this is exactly how you'll want to set it up. So it'll generate an ID for you here, kind of like a public ID, and you'll also have a private key or a client secret. And so it's only showing like the last digits of mine here. But yeah, you just need to go in. It'll have a name. You can name it anything. It'll have a homepage URL, which for you developing locally, it'll always just be localhost 3000. And then an authorization callback URL. And this one is important because we're gonna point to a specific API or a specific endpoint in the app that exists. And so this is standard. It's standard for any Next.js app that uses authentication. Stacker News is using NextAuth here, I believe. Or wait, that would be under Pages, API, Auth. Yeah, NextAuth is what they're using. And so this would be standardized for any NextAuth app, but you would have this exact endpoint where we've got API/auth/callback/GitHub. And so that's an important thing to remember or to have. And yeah, you just fill in those, these 3 fields right here, update the application or create it in your case, and then you'll get a client ID and a client secret. And this is what you'll want to put in your local .env.sample for when you're running the app. And I'm not going to click on this because I don't want to dox my keys and rotate them right now. But yes, that is how you get your OAuth app for logging in. And then at that point, you can just go to the app here. I can go to login, and I'm going to click on the GitHub provider, and should be pretty straightforward. Should be logged into, I guess, just my GitHub account here. Cool. So yes, now you're logged in. You can seemingly go make posts, but when you try and do that, you'll realize, wait, I don't have any sats. And if I want to make a discussion post, it's going to cost, 1 sat here. So you'll need to figure out how to load up sats. So this is something else that kind of took me a while that I can show you quickly how to do. The easiest way here, you can exec into one of these containers and like get into the command line and manually update the database but I'm just using an extension here, the pgadmin 4 extension for Docker. So Docker Desktop, it has extensions, and pgadmin 4 is it's actually a really popular app if you don't know of it for Postgres, just kind of a Postgres explorer and tool. So I already have mine set up here. Put my password. And gosh, I wish this was on dark mode. Yes, so you will not have any servers here when you start this up. So yeah, just look up how to install extensions on Docker Desktop. It's pretty easy, but you'll kind of go in, it'll have you create a master password, and then you'll need to make a new server here by going to File, or wait, Object. Oh no, I guess you go in a server here. Yeah, create new server group. So I can show you just what that would look like. No, not a new server group. You actually need to connect, not create. I forgot where you go to create. Create database. Yes, here it is. Okay, so under the object tab, create database. And you'll need to take the database name. Yeah, I believe you'll just need the database name. No, this is under stackernews. Register server. Okay, this is it. Register server. So it'll be under the top level of servers here. Right click, register server. Ugh. Yeah, like I'm not even super familiar with this app, but I know how to make connections. I know how to explore. And that's basically all you'll need here. But you'll register a new server, and you'll need to put in the name, and you'll need to put in this connection information. And this was a little bit difficult for me to figure out as well. Like you need these database variables basically. And you can actually find them. I think these are the static variables. They're down here. Yeah, so Postgres password, Postgres user. And of course, this is just for local version. This isn't the production stuff. And then the database URL. But yeah, I can go ahead and just show you what my setup is here, which should work on any machine. I think if I go to properties, yes. So name is stackernews here. That's just the name of the database. And then for the connection, since we're running it on Docker here, this took me forever to figure out. I was trying to point to, like the correct IP address inside of the Docker container, but you have to set up all of this networking to get it working. But yeah, you can just do a shortcut for that and do host.docker.internal and then point to the port 5431. And that will always be the port. And this host.docker internal, it just lets you access your Docker's internal network, because Docker runs its own network with its own IP addresses and ports that's kind of separate from what's on your laptop, what's on the rest of your local environment, which is one of the reasons it's nice, but it can be kind of hard to work with sometimes if you're trying to access that internal network. You have to exec in basically. But yeah, with that there, I mean, you've got the name stackernews, host.docker.internal. This is the port, and then put in the username SN. And I think when I set it up, it had me put in the password, which once again you can find here, which just, yeah, it's just password for your local version. And once you have that database connection set up, you can actually start exploring the database here. And so that's what I have open. And you'll have this databases group, stackernews databases, and you'll want to go into the stackernews one here. Following that, you want to go into schemas, public, and then we can have access to the tables here. And so these are the actual database tables that are live in our local version. And if we go, we can look into the item table, and I can right click on this and I can see view, edit data, all rows. And so this will be kind of tiny here. Can I make this a little bigger? And so we see all these rows of different items that are created here, and all their properties and all of their data, and we can actually update and write into here and save it. And so this is a shortcut. You see here we only have 40 or 41 items here. But yeah, we can manually update the data. And so now if we want to make a new post locally, if we have something we want to test or try out, we can just go into our profile or our account. I think it should be view, edit data, all rows, and we can manually update how many sats we have. You can only do this after you log in. Obviously, creates an account. But oh wait, no, not accounts. It will be users. Cool. And yeah, there's a bunch of test users that are created up front. So scroll to the bottom and I can see my real users here. These are the only users I needed to create throughout the process. But yeah, you scroll to the bottom and then over here to the right, pretty quickly you'll run into MSATs, which is the millisatoshis unit. So, 1,000th of a sat. And you can just manually come in here and update the property. So I can give myself, a bunch of sats again and update my value for, is that my user? Yeah, it is. Right there. And then I can do save data changes and it'll update it immediately. And then boom, I have 1,000,000 sats in my account. Great. And so I can make, a test post. And it should be created here. Cool. And yeah, everything on local, like it takes a little bit longer. So I don't know if that's Docker. I don't know if it's my machine, all the crap I've got on here, but it does take a while to load pages sometimes. But usually jumping in between items is kind of a little bit quicker. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of the basics, the overview of like the structure of the code base. A lot of the stuff that you might be working on, which might be UI things or database things. There's no doubt some pretty gross stuff in here, some pretty like deep code that'd be hard to get into, but to make a lot of the meaningful changes you really only need to know how to change the database and the pages and the components. And, maybe some of these queries here in the fragments. And so, yeah, that's kind of a basic overview of the code base. And I guess for me now, like my task here tonight is I'm reviewing my code for the new bounties feature we have for stackernews that me and Keon, the founder, have kind of been talking about and throwing around ideas about. And so this is my implementation of it. I've got it fully working now. I can kind of show it to you in the app. And I want to just look over my code and just see some of the garbage that's maybe in there. And I don't know, maybe it's good. I've kind of just been like making the features and going back maybe once to clean stuff up. But I want to just look over the code, see if it looks good, and potentially make a PR tonight and get that whole process started. So if that's something that's new for you, it would be useful to see, definitely stick around and we can get it figured out. So yeah, I'm going to go over here now. We've got the local app running, so maybe I'll make some quick changes if I find anything nasty that I've done. But yeah, I kind of just want to look through the code here. So this is my branch here with all of my changes on it, and I just rebased with the stackernews master today just to make sure there's no merge conflicts and just like get everything in sync here. So you'll see, throughout there's different commits from Keon and me. So they've been merged together successfully, and it's up to date. Everything seems to be working. but I just want to look at all of my changes. So I think I need to open up a PR. Yeah, just kind of open up a PR to Stacker News Master right now, or at least a draft PR. I think I can open up a draft PR. So we'll go from Austin, Stacker News, my master branch, into Stacker News Master. So that looks right. Okay, files changed. This is what I wanted to see. This is the, okay, well, that's one thing I found. I just saw there at the top. I have my GitHub ID, my GitHub secret in here. So I accidentally pushed my env local. So there's one thing on the list to take care of at the top. But yeah, this was the view I was looking for here. I just want to see like the actual changes that were made here. And this also will help for, a little bit of an overview, I guess. So yeah, type defs, definitely a lot of stuff in here. So it looks like already right up front, I'm seeing that I've got some linting differences here, because none of these I actually changed, but you can see it's formatted differently down here. So I'm gonna want to see what linter Stacker News uses and just like rerun it on my local code. I think it probably uses just like standard JS, but yeah, just want to make sure I have the right linter and run that through, just so I'm not throwing different syntax, different format into, the PR. Like, that doesn't look good. But yeah, looks like the only thing here is two of my queries that I added for get bounties by user and then by username, which are pretty straightforward queries. We'll run into them here. Poll option. So wait, no, we gotta expand this. So under item here, adding my fields, bounty, like this is what it was to add, bounties to Stacker News. It's pretty simple. These are just query fields though, under the item type, but yeah, everything in here is pretty straightforward. So new component here, got a comment. I'm just gonna go ahead and find this locally because that's an easy thing to do. Where are we here? Bountyform.js. Bountyform. I'll just get rid of that. I guess I don't need use me. And I see another comment here. Don't believe I need this. Okay, cool. Yeah, just go ahead and pull together these changes I'm going to make. So here's kind of what a query looks like. This is actually a mutation and upsert. So this is me posting a bounty, because this is from the bounty form component. So just getting parameters in, having a upsert bounty that I can call on submit. Yeah, which I'm doing right here. And so, yeah, a lot of this is actually just like a good component that shows what the Stacker News code looks like. Queries, I guess we do have like form validation here. But yeah, I think this looks fine. It looks pretty straightforward. I just want to see if I have any like ugly inline styles as well, like anything that I just did quickly to make a workaround, but no, it looks good. Updates to comment. Yeah, some conditional rendering here for like the bounty icon. And so this is like these icons will appear on bounty items and they'll be green when they're paid and then gray. I actually don't have an unpaid bounty here right now. They'll be gray when they're kind of open or ready to be done. So I can make a new bounty here and we can see what that looks like. And I'll make my bounty just like 999 sats. Post it. Yeah, and that's kind of what it looks like. Unpaid, it'll say 999 sats bounty, and then paid, it'll say paid. So lots of just simple conditional rendering was what I was doing in here. And that's kind of what a lot of the code already is. So yeah, it looks like I'm actually using classes here for the styles. That's good. Yeah, it looks pretty straightforward. More conditional rendering. Forward to me. I don't remember having this. Forward to me. This is an item.js. Oh, I guess some of these changes will actually be keyons changes, I think, because I did like a huge rebase in the middle of working on this. Yeah, so I don't think I ever touched that. So that's good to know. Conditional rendering, using class names or using the Tailwind kind of class name styles here. So that's how things were standardized. Okay, that wasn't me. It's commented out though. Here's a new component I made. Once again, we're doing our use query from Apollo. So pulling in bounty items by user constant. So that's, yeah. Once again, a good component to like just look at if you're wondering what it looks like to add something on here, because you kind of got to touch a lot of things. Like for me to do this new query, I had to, go into the type definitions and make sure that this query existed. But I also had to go into the fragments and create the query, and then I come into here in the component and make it available to kind of call. So this calls when the component renders, and yeah, just destructures the data. Then we render it in the accordion item. And yeah, a lot of this code, like I would just take from what already existed in like the items component or something like that, where it's listing out items. Like definitely want to don't reinvent the wheel, and just like reuse as much code as you can. What else is in here? Pay bounty. So here's a lot of comments. So that's something. Oops. Actual pay bounty. So this is in a query or a mutation. Changing the act. Okay, so this is for paying a bounty. And so we're going into the acts table here. The acts is like any action that happens. So like a payment is probably the most notable. Like if you do anything with tipping or payments, you'll probably have a similar mutation to this. It's in pay bounty, but yeah, so I'm just updating it with, I guess, our bounty sats when they're paid. So that's this update query, okay. So I don't think I need this. I think I just left this in case. Do we need to upvote to have it as well? No, we don't. We're not doing that. That was a question I had. Just if when a bounty gets paid, if it counts as an upvote as well, but we're not going to do that. So we did this. Should have a confirm modal with a success message. Yeah, okay. So this is all old stuff, just me leaving notes to myself. That looks good. Okay, so clean that up. Just look at the classes here, look at the styles, make sure there's nothing weird. Okay. component sets. Yeah, and this is probably something I just taken from, yeah, to update all ancestors. I had just taken this from the item component. Just trying to replicate what was already there, not reinvent the wheel. Class name there. Yeah, it looks fine. Display inline block. That's a little weird. Why am I doing that? Dot pay. Pay bounty. One thing as well, let me see here. Take forever to load. Oh no, you can't double. Okay, I thought you could double pay bounties. Okay, that's something I'm gonna wanna test. See this pay bounty button again. Because I don't know, anytime I see inline block, I'm like, oh, what did I do here? Was this like a hacky workaround or something? So updates to the fragments here, just passing in the field and the queries into comments, into items. That's pretty straightforward. Here are my queries that I built in the fragments. Or really just calling them, yeah, from the top level. And the bounties, this is probably just a copy of like the items page. Oh wait, no, this is the pages/name bounties. So this is like the personal page for each user. So I can go to like my username /bounties. And it should generate a list of all of the bounties I made. Yeah, past bounties, so. Oops. Very cool. Yeah, some of this, was this formatting? Yeah, some of this is like linting and formatting, it looks like again, because we're going from single quotes to double quotes here, so okay, that's kind of confusing and annoying. I didn't change this, or did I? Post. Okay, so this was just adding the bounty option on the post form. Okay. So, looks like no inline styles or anything ugly like that. So that's pretty good. Yeah. Updating what renders. And then, yes, here's the migration I ran. And so, since I was updating what was being passed into items, this was where I got the most help from Keon the founder. And if you ever did database stuff, you would definitely want to be in like discussion on the repo about this. But anytime that you update like what's going into an item, what can be on an item, you need to update this create item, the SQL kind of function that's here. And so it's a little bit confusing. You have to go into the migrations and find, so if I go to Prisma, migrations here, and you have to find the most recent migration that updated the create item function. And there's also create item and update item here. So you have to find the most recent both of those and just basically copy what was there and then update what you need to add to it. And that is exactly what I did, and I just tested it, made sure it worked. And you can see here, like at the top, I'm altering the item table and I'm adding the new bounty, making sure it's not null or anything like that. And then, yeah. Just a lot of this was stuff that was already in the create item function, and I just made sure to pass in the optional bounty parameter here. Ooh, I'm not gonna do that now. Is that the very last thing? Yeah, so update, create item, and I know these work because I've done it, I've ran it locally, and so that's not any kind of concern. And then, yeah, the Prisma schema just added the bounty integer here as a This new field is new type. Then our bounty bag. That's just a syntax change. Nice. So, wow. Okay, that was not too much code for what took me quite a lot of time, and I think it looks pretty good. So I think we're gonna be able to open up a PR here. So that's exciting. Yeah, not too gross, but definitely I want to go in. I want to do more QA testing for this and stuff like that. So I might do that, and I want to expand on this further since like now I have experience with Stacker News. Like I want to make it easier for others to work on it, and I think so does Stacker News. I think that's going to become a priority for them, is like making it easier, better to work with open source projects. So hopefully there will be more beyond this, but at least for the beginning part of this, you can see how to set up and run Stacker News locally and get an account, get some sats, and then get a sneak peek at what's coming here with bounties. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what I wanted to do here already. Yeah, I thought the code would be a lot more gross, but it's looking pretty clear here. So I think I'm gonna call it here for the stream. Yeah, a lot of the reason here, I just wanted to make like my first test stream, make sure everything's working, and I was like, hey, let's share this Stacker News stuff because I know a lot of people are interested and wanting to contribute. So cool. Thanks for tuning in if you did, and hopefully everything worked here correctly. And reach out to me if you are wanting to contribute to Stacker News or have your eyes on an issue. Like, I would definitely love to help you. But yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Let's keep this going. I'm gonna keep doing these streams for the workshops and stuff like that. I'm gonna try and multi-stream. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a good first test session. So thanks for tuning in, and sign out here.